I would turn now and talk about the ongoing discussion on the citizenship question on the census. And I hope this won't be a tongue tire for me, but have been amazing developments in the last few days. I just want to kind of lay out what has occurred. So, President Trump wanted to add, or the administration wanted to add a question to the census, which is required by the U.S. Constitution to happen every 10 years. So it must happen in 2020. The question that the Trump administration wanted to add relates to citizenship. Essentially, among the many other questions the census asks, it is, are you a citizen? If not, basically, what's your status? And because there are obviously legal statuses people hold that are not citizenship. They could be green card holders or something else. But trying to get to the notion on the census, asking the question, are you a citizen? So there were many left-wing organizations that spoke out against it, and the census, the plan was moving forward. It is actually the Commerce Department that puts out the census with input from the Justice Department. So the case challenging whether or not the question could be added to the census got all the way to the Supreme Court. We already talked about this. June 27th, the Supreme Court, in a very surprising ruling from many people's viewpoint, ruled 5-4, Justice Roberts going with the liberal side of the court, and the 4 conservative justices were fine with the question, but the 5-4 ruling said, it did not, to be clear, it did not say that citizenship can never be asked on the census. It did not say that. The Supreme Court said, actually, that the case had to be sent back down to a lower court. Essentially, they were trying to get to the question of what was the motivation for wanting the question on the census. And there were the argument of the plaintiffs, the people who brought the lawsuit, which are a handful of Democrat-run states, ACLU, other immigrant rights organizations, the kind of leftist mindset in this country brought the lawsuit saying that there should not be a question on the census about citizenship. So the Supreme Court ruled the case had to go back down to the lower court to try to work through what the motivation was of the president and the administration wanting to put the question on the census. Well, to be really clear, and Justice Roberts is perfectly aware of this, there was not time between the June 27th ruling when the Supreme Court said you got to go back down to the trial courts, and the time that the Commerce Department had to get the census to the printer to get it started. The census has to be ready by law by a certain time. So it was essentially, even though the decision never said you can't have the citizenship question on the census, the practical impact of Roberts siding with the liberals who don't want the question on the census was to make it almost impossible for the Trump administration to move forward with the census question. So that happened on June 27th. Then on July 2nd, a lawyer within the Department of Justice named Kate Bailey, trial attorney at the Department of Justice, sent out an email, and then later there was a tweet confirming it, an email saying that the Trump administration had said, okay, we surrender. We can't find a way around this. We're going to go ahead and send the census to the printer. She sends this out on July 2nd. There was, of course, hooting and hollering and cheering by the left, saying, oh, yay, we kept the citizenship question off the census. Very next day, July 3rd, President Trump put out a tweet saying, this is Trump's tweet, July 3rd. The news reports about the Department of Commerce dropping its quest to put the citizenship question on the census is incorrect, or, to state it differently, fake, in all caps. We are absolutely moving forward as we must because of the importance of the answer to this question. So Trump is telling DOJ, find a way to do this. We got to get this question on the census. And we have a statement, a kind of non-specific statement, but there was a statement put out by Attorney General Barr saying, we think we found a way to do it. We think we found a legal way. So they're still sorting it out. He did not describe in his statement what the legal way was to keep that question on the census. In the meantime, the Department of Justice announced that they are changing the lawyers within the Department of Justice who are going to be dealing with this census question litigation. So Barr is saying we're changing lawyers. He was required to make a filing with the court to announce they're changing lawyers. just within the Department of Justice, changing lawyers on who's handling the government's arguments on the subject of this census question. Barr says we're changing lawyers, and he files the appropriate papers. And the lawyers for the plaintiffs, the lawyers for the states challenging this census question, and the ACLU and all the immigrant rights groups are fighting. They are opposing in court, opposing the right of Attorney General Barr to designate which lawyers inside the Department of Justice ought to be handling this case. They are saying, these plaintiffs' lawyers, the ACLU types, are saying the Attorney General doesn't get to decide who among his lawyers handles this case. We, the plaintiffs' lawyers, we get to decide. We get to say, we like the old lawyers. We don't want the new lawyers. Well, I got to tell you something. If you ever wanted a tip, if you ever wanted a hint that this entire obnoxiousness of the American left is in part tied to and relying on this, and people always say, oh, deep state, but the deep state lawyers inside the Department of Justice, the lawyers who are trying to push the Obama agenda, who are holdovers from the Obama administration, trying to push the Obama agenda. So Barr finally realizes that the lawyers, Attorney General Barr finally realizes the lawyers in the Department of Justice who've been handling this, they're not really helping the cause. They're not really trying to move the ball forward and find a way to do this. So he wants to switch lawyers. And people, I am surmising this reason. No one has told me this. I'm just making this as an educated guess. Barr figures out the lawyers inside the DOJ are not helping the cause of finding a legal way to get the question on the census, and the plaintiffs' lawyers are thinking exactly the same thing. Hey, wait a minute. We have lawyers inside the DOJ who are on our side, who are just, they're helping us along here. We don't want new lawyers who might bring new legal reasoning and fighting on this census question. And I'll tell you, folks, we've talked about this in this case before, and I just think it's important to understand the reasons behind what both sides are doing. One more thing I want to make clear, though, about the facts to keep straight on this, and that is I sent to my wonderful producer, Matt, a slide I'm going to play in there it is, right there. You keep hearing the leftists in this country saying, we haven't had a census question we haven't had a citizenship question on the census since 1950. This is ridiculous. This is racist. This is wrong. And you hear other people saying, we've had this all along. Well, here is the blocked out, laid out answer, and maybe hard to read, so I'm just going to tell you the answer. The census has contained a question relating to citizenship for 100 years. 1870 through 1950, at least, they had the question of your birthplace. They had, starting in about 18, I guess it must be, I can't read this chart because there's a funny line, but somewhere between, I guess, 1880, they started asking, or a little after that, started asking about your citizenship. So the line on the right, the column on the right is citizenship, column on the left is birthplace. Even into 1960, you're seeing different shades of green there. Into 1960, they had a random 25% of the census form sent out included the question of birthplace. And they had, throughout all those decades leading up to the year 2000, some portion of people receiving the census in the mail got the question of birthplace, and some portion got the question of citizenship. It came along in 2010 when President Obama did not like that question on the census. He took the whole question out. The point of all this is to say it is not an out of left field, bizarre topic. It's not something that the left ought to be saying, what in the world are we asking this for? It must be racist, must be horrible. I'm going to tell you why this matters so much and why President Trump is exactly right to push this. What happens based on census data, what happens on the measure of how many people live in various states, number one, impacts the number of seats in the U.S. Congress that are allotted to each state. So the percentage of illegal aliens living in your state are adding to your state's representation in Congress, and therefore adding to your state's representation in the Electoral College. There's also a financial element to this, which is in Congress, when they pass laws and they are spending congressional money on all sorts of government assistance programs, they obviously rely on population data, that a high state with a high population is going to get more money for government assistance programs than a state with lower population. So Congress would be able to, if the census question were there, are you a citizen, would be able to figure out what portion of the number of people populating any particular state are illegal aliens. Now, and may decide, you know what, we're going to cut back because, just raw numbers, if your city has 2 million people, but a full 1 million of them are illegal aliens, we're not going to be sending you as much money because that's not really what our government assistance programs are designed to do. We're going to cut back and we're going to base our allotment to your city on the number of legal citizens. There are all sorts of ways the government can use this data to actually adjust the spending in our country to focus on spending tax dollars on legal citizens. Secondly, what the left is arguing is that they don't want this question on the census because, after all, people might be frightened and not fill out the census. They might realize, hey, I don't want to have to admit that I'm a legal alien, so I don't want to answer this question, so I'm not doing the census. So you may have, I would concede the point, you're going to have an undercount in the census. If the question is on there, there will be people who won't answer because they are not legal citizens. They have no legal right to be here. And you know what? That is a cost we can bear. We can put up with that reality because all of the benefits that flow to the states from an overcount seem to flow to the benefit of the leftists who want to have illegal aliens in America, don't want to have secure borders, support sanctuary cities, and are working toward having this illegal alien population make their way eventually to becoming citizens once the Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the U.S. White House. The Democrats benefit from the presence of illegal aliens here, both immediately and long term, because the mindset of the American left is all these people who've entered America illegally and live here illegally, keep them here long enough, and the Democrats, will be able to have a firm, solid Democrat majority voting base in this country once they are able to make all those people citizens. There is it is very much a raw, harsh political calculation by the American left. They don't want anything to interfere with people staying here illegally. They're happy to have them here illegally. It is the purpose of their policies to keep them here illegally and to make them comfortable. So this is going to become, back to where we are legally in the census question, this may become a little bit of a constitutional crisis. I'm getting ahead of where we are, but I will tell you that if the Commerce Department, the president, and oh, by the way, a majority of Americans, a significant majority of Americans, wants the citizenship question on the census. And the courts, through Roberts, I don't even get off on Roberts' problems today, but Roberts having sent this back to lower court, if the left succeeds in keeping this question off of the census, they are succeeding in perpetuating the overall mission they have to, not secure the border, never build a wall, let people come in, don't restrain them in any way, don't even bother checking the refugee status or asylum status. Let them be released into sanctuary cities and states. Keep them all here. This is a very, very strategic move by the American left. It's not happenstance. And the idea that we're going to be here in the year 2019 preparing for the 2020 census and let the left bowl over the entire census process and say, we're just not going to let you know how many legal aliens are here. I think the left is worried the American people don't want to, the left does not want the American people to understand how many people are here in this country illegally, because it will cause people to support firmer immigration policy, more secure borders, more deportations of people who have no right to be here. The poll, by the way, before we're going to do one last thing, folks, going to get to our why it matters to you, but here's the polling data in America. Pretty large poll was done, this is a Harvard, Capps, and Harris poll, so it's a big poll. 67% overall of American voters want the census to ask what people living in the U.S. whether they are citizens, which includes, and you got to get this, so 67% overall, 88% of Republicans, 52% of Democrats. majority, slim majority of Democrats think the census should ask about citizenship, and then of course 63% of independents. So that's where we are. America wants it, the administration wants it, the Commerce Department wants it, and I'm going to tell you folks, I don't think that the Commerce Department and the Trump administration are going to take this sitting down, the idea that the courts are going to muddle up their effort to get this question on the census. I don't know what Attorney General Barr has in mind, but he is on a mission to get that question on the census, and I think he's exactly right.